What if I told you that the most dangerous weapon in all of football, a 6'1", 230-pound destroyer of defensive backs, is sitting in Philadelphia right now, packing his bags, and the Kansas City Chiefs are waiting at the door? That's not a rumor. That's not Twitter talk. That's the situation unfolding right now in real time in the NFL. And if it happens, if A.J. Brown actually ends up in a Kansas City Chiefs uniform catching passes from Patrick Mahomes, the entire league is going to feel it. Stay with me, because this story is deeper, wilder, and more dramatic than you think. And by the time we get to the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why this might be the most important trade of this entire decade of Chiefs football. Let's go. Chapter 1. The man, the myth, the monster wide receiver. Before we talk about what's happening right now, you need to understand exactly who A.J. Brown is, because if you only know him as a good receiver, you are dramatically underestimating what we're discussing here. A.J. Brown is not just good. A.J. Brown is a generational talent wearing pads. Think about this. This man plays the wide receiver position like he is personally offended by every cornerback who dares line up across from him. He is 6 feet 1 inches tall. He weighs 226 pounds. That is not receiver size. That is linebacker size. That is running back size. And yet, this man runs crisp routes, catches the football in traffic, and drags defenders down the field like they're attached to a locomotive. When A.J. Brown arrived in Philadelphia in 2022, traded from the Tennessee Titans on the very night of the NFL draft, nobody could have predicted what was about to happen. The Eagles gave up a first-round pick for him. People questioned whether that was too much. Within 2 seasons, nobody was questioning it anymore. Back-to-back 1,400-yard receiving seasons. Read that again. Back-to-back 1,400 yards. And the Eagles won a Super Bowl championship. This man showed up, showed out, and delivered for Philadelphia in every single way that mattered. But here's where the story gets complicated. Here's where it gets human. Because even with all that success, something was wrong inside that locker room. Something between A.J. Brown and the city of Philadelphia started to crack. And once a crack appears in a relationship like that, it almost never heals on its own. Chapter 2. The Breaking Point. Let me paint you a picture of what 2025 looked like for A.J. Brown and the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles were defending Super Bowl champions. The pressure was enormous. The expectations were sky high. Every opponent on the schedule had circled the date in red marker. Every game was going to be a dogfight. And A.J. Brown, the number 1 receiver on the best team in the NFL, started the season with inconsistency. There were drops. There were quiet games. There were moments where it seemed like the connection between Brown and his quarterback wasn't what it used to be. The offense that had been so electrifying, so unstoppable, started to look human. Now, here's what you need to understand about elite athletes. They are wired differently than you and me. When a normal person has a bad week at work, they go home, they vent to their family, they sleep it off, and they come back on Monday. When an elite athlete has a bad stretch of games, it eats them alive from the inside. It consumes them. And some of them, instead of going quiet, start looking around and asking a very dangerous question. Is this still the right place for me? A.J. Brown started asking that question out loud. Before the trade deadline in 2025, the rumors started swirling. Brown wanted out. Brown was unhappy. Brown's relationship with the organization had soured. The Eagles ultimately kept him through the deadline, but the damage was done. The trust was broken. And when you lose trust in a relationship, whether it's personal or professional, you can try to glue it back together, but the cracks still show. Now it's 2026. Free agency just kicked off. The Eagles just re-signed Dallas Goedert, their star tight end. They brought back some defensive pieces. But A.J. Brown? A.J. Brown is still sitting there, still on the roster, still with a massive contract, and by all accounts, still wanting out. ESPN's Adam Schefter, one of the most connected insiders in the history of the sport, got on national television and said this, and these words matter. I would still lean towards an A.J. Brown trade because that's what I think he prefers. Adam Schefter. Not some random Twitter account, not some guy with a burner profile. Adam Schefter. And that is where the Kansas City Chiefs enter this story. Chapter 3. Kansas City's open wound. Now let's go to Kansas City for a minute, because while all of this is going on in Philadelphia, the Chiefs have their own problem, and it's a problem they've been quietly managing for the past couple of years, but it's starting to become impossible to ignore. Patrick Mahomes does not have a number 1 receiver. I'll say that again because I want it to sink in. Patrick Mahomes, the greatest quarterback of his generation, arguably the greatest quarterback to ever play the game, a man who has won multiple Super Bowl championships and redefined what the position looks like, does not have a legitimate number 1 wide receiver. Think about the greatest quarterback-receiver duos in NFL history. Montana had Rice, Brady had Moss, Peyton had Harrison and Wayne, Big Ben had Antonio Brown. Now look at Mahomes' receiver room entering 2026 and tell me it doesn't make you a little nervous.
Rashee Rice, undeniably talented, electric with the football in his hands, but his future is murky. There are off-field concerns that have followed him into the offseason, and his contract situation is complicated. He's in a contract year, playing for his financial future, which means pressure, which means distraction. Marquise Brown, a legitimate receiver who can make plays, is unsigned, just gone, into free agency, looking for a deal somewhere, and Kansas City hasn't moved to bring him back. Juju Smith-Schuster, a fan favorite, a warrior, a guy who gave everything he had in a Chiefs uniform, also a free agent. Mecole Hardman, a speedster, a gadget player, a guy who scored the Super Bowl winning touchdown in one of the greatest comeback stories in NFL history, but a gadget player is not a number one receiver. Xavier Worthy, the fastest man in the league when he was drafted, a guy with electric potential, but still developing, still finding his footing at the NFL level. And that's it. That is the receiving core that Patrick Mahomes is supposed to work with as he tries to win yet another Super Bowl. You see the problem, right? You see the gaping hole? The Chiefs went out this offseason and they fixed their running back room. They signed Kenneth Walker III out of Seattle, a guy who had back-to-back 1,000-yard rushing seasons with the Seahawks. Pro Football Focus ranked him the #1 running back in the entire league in 2025. Mahomes now has a true bell cow back that he hasn't had in years. They added draft capital. They traded Trent McDuffie to the Rams and loaded up on picks. They now own 2 first-round picks in the 2026 draft, plus multiple picks in the top 40. The foundation is being rebuilt. But a running back and draft picks don't throw touchdowns to wide receivers. And right now, the Chiefs' wide receiver room is the most glaring weakness on a team that is still trying to compete for another championship. Patrick Mahomes is too good to be held back by a mediocre receiving group. The man will still put up numbers. He'll still make magic happen. He always does. But there is a ceiling. There is an invisible wall that even the greatest quarterback in the world hits when his receiver room isn't built to match his talent. And here's the thing that should terrify every Chiefs fan who hasn't been paying attention. Last February, the Eagles beat the Chiefs in Super Bowl 59, and one of the reasons the Eagles were able to execute their game plan so efficiently, so devastatingly, was because of their weapons, the variety of threats, the mismatches they could create. Philadelphia had tools that Kansas City simply could not match on the other side of the ball. That's a scar. That loss doesn't go away. That's the kind of defeat that stays with a franchise, with a coaching staff, with a quarterback who is used to winning. And right now, the Chiefs front office knows that to get back to the top, they need to add a weapon that changes the math. A.J. Brown would change the math. Chapter 4, the wish list. Here's where this gets really interesting. Here's where the story stops being about the Eagles' problem and starts being about A.J. Brown's desire. Multiple reports now confirm that A.J. Brown and his camp have done their homework. They've made phone calls. They've had conversations. They've identified the teams where Brown wants to play if, and this is still an if, a trade gets done. According to Sports Illustrated's Albert Breer, one of the most respected reporters covering the NFL, the Kansas City Chiefs are on A.J. Brown's personal wish list. Let that land for a second. It's not just that the Chiefs need him. He wants to go there. This isn't a situation where a player gets dragged somewhere he doesn't want to be. A.J. Brown has specifically looked at the Kansas City Chiefs and said, in some form through some channel, yes, that's a destination I want. That's a situation I'd embrace. And why wouldn't he? Think about it from his perspective. You've played your whole career trying to win, trying to be on the biggest stage, trying to be recognized as one of the best. You've had back-to-back 1,400-yard seasons. You've won a Super Bowl. But things went sideways in Philadelphia. The relationship is broken. The trust is gone. And on the other side of the country, there's Patrick Mahomes, the greatest quarterback of your era, a man who has a supernatural ability to find his receivers, to extend plays, to make throws that shouldn't be possible from angles that shouldn't work, a man who has proven over and over again that he can take any receiver and make them look elite. Now imagine you're A.J. Brown, a receiver who's already elite on his own merits, catching passes from Patrick Mahomes.
And for the Eagles themselves, trading A.J. Brown to Kansas City would be one of the most uncomfortable, most painful transactions in recent memory. You'd be selling your Super Bowl weapon to the team you just beat. You'd be handing your rival the key to their own locker. But here's the cold reality. If Philly doesn't get the right compensation, they won't trade him at all. And if the relationship is truly broken beyond repair, having a disgruntled superstar on your roster is worse than the dead cap hit of trading him. The Eagles are caught in an impossible position, and every day this drags on, the pressure builds. Chapter 9, the wildcard teams. Now wait, before we get too locked into the Chiefs-Eagles narrative, we have to talk about the competition, because the Chiefs are not the only team in this race, and there are a few situations that could completely change the trajectory of this story. The New England Patriots. Mike Vrabel is back in the NFL as the head coach in New England, and the history between Vrabel and A.J. Brown goes back to those early Tennessee Titans years, where Vrabel first developed Brown into the player he became. There's mutual respect, there's chemistry, there's a shared language between coach and player. The Patriots need a #1 receiver desperately. They signed Romeo Doubs in free agency to try to address the position, but Doubs is a solid #2 at best. He is not a true alpha receiver. Adding A.J. Brown alongside Doubs would give quarterback Drake May one of the most dangerous receiving duos in the entire AFC overnight. Imagine Drake May, a 22-year-old quarterback with enormous potential, developing under Vrabel's guidance.
with A.J. Brown as his security blanket. The growth curve on May's development accelerates dramatically when he has a receiver who can make contested catches and create yards after contact. Brown would essentially be May's graduate school education compressed into a single offseason. The Patriots are a real threat in this race. Don't sleep on them. But here's the thing that still tilts the table toward Kansas City. The Patriots are a project. They're building towards something. Kansas City is already there. Kansas City is already at the destination that New England is trying to reach. A.J. Brown is 28 years old. He doesn't have time to wait for a rebuild. He needs to win now, and the Chiefs are the clearest path to a championship that exists in the American Football Conference. Chapter 10. What the numbers say. Let's talk statistics for a minute, because the numbers in this situation tell a story that words sometimes struggle to capture. A.J. Brown's 2 seasons in Philadelphia, with back-to-back 1,400-yard campaigns, that puts him in elite company. There have only been a handful of receivers in NFL history to sustain that level of production in consecutive seasons. He's in conversations with the all-time greats at that point. In Kansas City, the Chiefs' current wide receiver room last season produced combined numbers that were simply insufficient for a team trying to compete at the highest level. The lack of a true go-to receiver outside the numbers created a predictability in the passing game that opposing defenses were able to exploit, especially in big games. When you look at Patrick Mahomes' efficiency numbers in games where he had access to a legitimate number 1 receiver versus games where he was working without one, the gap is significant. Mahomes with a dangerous wide receiver operates closer to his absolute ceiling. Mahomes without that piece, while still extraordinary, leaves points on the board. Now here's a number that should stop you in your tracks. The Chiefs are carrying 2 first-round picks into the 2026 NFL Draft. They acquired those picks from the Los Angeles Rams in the Trent McDuffie trade. Having 2 first-round picks gives you enormous flexibility. You can use both, or you can package them as trade ammunition. For a player like A.J. Brown, the Eagles' asking price likely starts at 1 first-round pick plus additional compensation. The Chiefs can cover that price. Right now, today, they have the currency to make this deal happen. The question is whether the will matches the wallet. Chapter 10. Brett Vrabel's decision. Let's talk about the man who ultimately holds the keys to this decision, Brett Vrabel, the general manager of the Kansas City Chiefs, the architect of this dynasty. Vrabel is one of the most aggressive and creative minds in the front office business. He has a history of making bold moves. He's never been afraid to spend big when the right player becomes available. He traded for Frank Clark. He restructured contracts and moved pieces around like a chess grandmaster to keep the Chiefs competitive year after year. But Vrabel also showed earlier this offseason that he values the idea of replenishing the roster. The whole point of trading McDuffie and getting those picks back was to build depth, to get young, to reload the roster with multiple pieces instead of betting everything on one big swing. And here's the thing, Brett Vrabel has to look at his receiver room and ask himself an honest question. Can this team win another Super Bowl with the wide receivers currently on the roster? I want you to think about that question seriously. Strip away the optimism. Strip away the loyalty to players who have been in the building. Look at the roster objectively. Xavier Worthy is exciting but unproven as a true alpha. Rashid Rice is talented but surrounded by uncertainty and is playing for his future. Everyone else is a depth piece or a specialist. If the answer to Vrabel's honest question is no, if this receiver room as currently constructed cannot carry the Chiefs to another championship, then the math changes. Then the logic of spending a first-round pick on a proven commodity starts to win the argument over the logic of accumulating multiple depth pieces. Because here's the thing about depth pieces. Depth pieces don't change a game. Depth pieces don't make a defensive coordinator lose sleep on Saturday night. Depth pieces don't create the kind of mismatches that swing playoff games in January. A.J. Brown creates mismatches. A.J. Brown makes defensive coordinators lose sleep. A.J. Brown changes games. One A.J. Brown is worth 3 depth pieces every single day of the week. Chapter 12. The timeline and what happens next. We're in March right now. Free agency is in full swing. The NFL Draft is coming up in April, and then we wait for June 1st. That is the date circled on every single calendar in every single front office that's been connected to the story, because that's when the Eagles' dead cap math shifts. That's when a trade becomes financially manageable for Philadelphia. That's when the dominoes can start to fall. Here's how the next few months likely play out. In April, the NFL Draft happens. The Chiefs use their picks. Maybe they use both first-round picks on defensive players, cornerbacks, who they desperately need after losing Trent McDuffie. Maybe they move one pick. Maybe they sit tight and wait, knowing that June is coming and the A.J. Brown situation needs to resolve itself. In May, the conversations get more intense behind closed doors. Agents make calls, front offices send texts. Brett Vrabel and Howie Roseman have conversations that happen off the record, away from reporters, in rooms where nobody has a microphone. The shape of a potential deal starts to form. And then June arrives, and everything either comes together or falls apart in the span of a few days. That is the window. That is the moment. And every NFL fan who cares about the future of this league should be watching very closely when that calendar page turns. Chapter 13. The what-if scenario. Let's do something fun. Let's close our eyes for a moment and imagine the world where this trade actually happens, where Brett Vrabel picks up the phone on June 2nd, calls Howie Roseman, and they hammer out a deal that sends A.J. Brown to Kansas City. Picture this. Training camp in St. Joseph, Missouri. The August sun beating down on Arrowhead's training complex, and on one side of the field catching passes from Patrick Mahomes is A.J. Brown, number 11, running routes that look effortless. Jump balls, crossing routes, go routes, red zone fades that he wins with his size and his physicality against cornerbacks who already know they're overmatched.
Patrick Mahomes, who has spent the better part of 2 seasons trying to make magic with receivers who aren't quite at his level, suddenly has a partner who matches his ambition. A receiver who doesn't just run routes but demands the ball, who isn't satisfied with checkdowns and screen passes, who wants the ball in traffic, down the field, in the moments that matter most. Travis Kelce, in what could be one of his final seasons, sees the defense's attention get pulled away from him for the first time in years. He's running free over the middle because there's a corner in panic mode on the outside trying to cover Brown, and Kenneth Walker is running behind a defense that can't afford to stack the box, because if you stack the box against this version of the Chiefs' offense, Mahomes will throw right over the top of you. This is a nightmare for the rest of the NFL. This is the thing that makes AFC defensive coordinators stare at their ceiling at 3 a.m. And when the postseason comes, when January arrives and the Chiefs are rolling through the playoffs again, with A.J. Brown catching touchdowns in prime time under the lights in games that the whole country is watching, that's when the story becomes legendary. That's when the chapters of a dynasty get added to the history books. Chapter 14, the counter-argument. Okay, I've given you the dream. Now let me give you the counterpoint, because I want to be honest with you, and honestly, this trade has real obstacles. The Chiefs have been clear through their actions this offseason that they are prioritizing their running back room and using draft capital to rebuild depth. Kenneth Walker's contract made that obvious. The stated intention to use picks to replenish the roster made that obvious. Even Albert Breer, one of the most dialed-in reporters in the league, wrote that the Chiefs are, quote, zeroed in on the running back spot and have a desire to replenish the roster with the picks they got in the McDuffie trade, end quote. That's not nothing. That's a real organizational philosophy that won't get overwritten lightly. And there's the contract issue. A.J. Brown has cap hits of approximately $12 million in 2026, then $26 million in 2027, then a massive $41 million in 2028. If they acquire him, they're not just taking on the trade price. They'd very likely need to restructure or extend his contract almost immediately to make the math work under the salary cap. That's a major financial commitment. Tying up that much cap space in a single wide receiver is a bold move even for a dynasty with cap flexibility. And there's the question of A.J. Brown's 2025 season. He had a down year. The consistency wasn't there. Some teams might look at that and wonder, was that a blip, a one-year aberration caused by circumstance? Or is it an early signal that the body is starting to slow down? The elite years are behind him. Most people watching this closely would tell you it was circumstantial. The team dynamic was broken, his head wasn't fully in it, the relationship with the Eagles had curdled. A fresh start, with new coaching and the right quarterback, almost certainly unlocks the real A.J. Brown again. But almost certainly is not guaranteed, and in the NFL, spending first-round picks on anything less than a guarantee is a gamble. Chapter 15, why it still happens. But here's why I still believe this trade has a real chance. Here's why the dream scenario isn't just a dream. Number 1, A.J. Brown wants it. When a player of this caliber specifically names your team as a destination, you listen, you pick up the phone, you have the conversation. The Chiefs are on his wish list. That matters enormously, because the worst thing you can do is trade picks for a player who becomes disgruntled in your building 6 months later. Number 2, the timing is right. Patrick Mahomes is in his prime, yes, but prime doesn't last forever. Every championship window has an expiration date. The window in Kansas City is wide open right now, but you can see it starting to close in the distance. Every year you delay is a year closer to when Mahomes is no longer at his absolute best, when Travis Kelce is retired, when the dynasty becomes history instead of present tense. The urgency...
The numbers that could produce are almost fictional. And it goes beyond just the individual glory. Kansas City is a winning organization. They've built a culture under Andy Reid that is the envy of every other franchise in the league. You don't just win in Kansas City. You win in style. You win with creativity. You win with joy. And then you win again the year after that. For a player like A.J. Brown, who is 28 years old, who is right in the prime window of his career, the idea of going to Kansas City and chasing more championships with the most dangerous quarterback in the game, that is not a hard sell. That sells itself. The other teams on Brown's list, the Buffalo Bills, the Los Angeles Chargers, the New England Patriots, are all legitimate contenders in different ways. But here's the cold truth about the current state of those situations. Buffalo already went out and traded for DJ Moore. Their receiver room is now spoken for. They're out of this race. The Chargers? They've been spending big on the offensive line and edge rush. Their cap situation makes a Brown trade extremely difficult to pull off. The money isn't there. New England has been the most connected team in this whole saga because Mike Vrabel, Brown's former coach with the Tennessee Titans, is now the head coach of the Patriots. There's history there. There's a relationship. There's a trust that already exists between coach and player. But here's the thing. New England is a rebuilding team. They have young quarterback Drake May, who is talented and promising. But is he ready to win a Super Bowl right now? Is he ready to put an offense on his back and carry it all the way to the championship? The honest answer is, we don't know yet. Kansas City already has the answer to that question. The answer is Mahomes.
The answer has been Mahomes for 7 years, and it's going to keep being Mahomes. Chapter 5. The Money Problem. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, okay, this sounds great in theory, but the NFL is a business, and businesses run on money. So what's stopping this from just happening right now, today? The answer is the salary cap and the Eagles' dead cap situation, and a very important date on the calendar. Here's how this works. A.J. Brown is signed to a massive contract with the Philadelphia Eagles. When a team trades a player before their contract is up, they take what's called a dead cap hit. Basically, they absorb a financial penalty for moving the player before the end of the deal. If the Eagles trade A.J. Brown before June 1st, 2026, they get hit with a dead cap charge of over $43 million. $43 million. That is a record-breaking dead cap figure for a wide receiver. It would gut the Eagles' financial flexibility and make it nearly impossible for them to add pieces before the upcoming season. That number alone is why this trade hasn't already happened. The Eagles would be financially damaged if they pull this trigger too early. But here's the thing. After June 1st, the math changes completely. After June 1st, the Eagles can split that dead cap hit across 2 seasons, taking about $16 million in 2026 and about $27 million in 2027. And by doing it that way, they actually save $7 million in the current year. $7 million isn't going to change the world, but it's enough to add a player or two. It's enough breathing room to make the trade palatable. So what this means, practically speaking, is that any A.J. Brown trade to the Kansas City Chiefs or anywhere else is almost certainly going to happen after June 1st. That's the timeline. That's the financial reality. June 1st is the magical date that unlocks this entire saga. The Athletic's Diana Russini, another highly connected NFL reporter, said it flat out. A trade involving Brown isn't imminent and won't happen until the start of June at the earliest. So we're sitting here, right now, in a holding pattern, like a plane circling an airport waiting for the runway to clear. The deal isn't done, but the conditions are forming, the storm is building, and on or after June 1st, when that runway finally opens up, everything could change in a matter of hours. Chapter 6. What the Chiefs would have to give up to make this happen. Now let's talk about what the Chiefs would actually have to surrender to make this happen, because nothing in this league comes free, not even close. The Eagles set the asking price high. They're not just giving away a 3-time Pro Bowl receiver who had back-to-back 1,400-yard seasons. Howie Roseman, Philadelphia's general manager, is one of the shrewdest negotiators in the sport. He's not going to do the Chiefs any favors. He's going to make them pay. In trade negotiations like this, the typical ask for a wide receiver of Brown's caliber is at minimum a first-round pick, possibly a first and an additional piece, another pick, a young player, something of legitimate value. Here's where the Chiefs' position gets interesting. Remember when they traded Trent McDuffie to the Los Angeles Rams? That deal didn't just move an elite cornerback, it also brought a significant haul of draft picks back to Kansas City. The Chiefs now sit on 2 first-round picks and multiple picks in the top 40 selections of this year's draft. That is considerable draft capital. That is trade deadline, game-changing, move-the-needle capital. If the Chiefs wanted to go get A.J. Brown, they have the ammunition. The question is whether they're willing to use it. And this is where the debate inside the organization gets really heated, because it's a classic NFL argument about philosophy. On one side, you have the voices saying, use the picks. You have Patrick Mahomes in the prime of his career. You have a window, a legitimate, real, closing window to win another Super Bowl. Every year you wait, that window gets smaller. These picks are currency, and the best thing you can do with currency is spend it on something that actually moves the needle. A.J. Brown moves the needle. Pull the trigger. On the other side, you have the voices saying, we just traded away Trent McDuffie specifically to get these picks so we could replenish the roster. We need multiple players. Using 2 or 3 picks on one receiver, as great as he is, depletes the very thing we just acquired. Andy Reid, Brett Veach, the minds running this franchise, they have to weigh both arguments. They have to decide which version of the future they believe in. And the clock is ticking. Chapter 7. Mahomes needs this. Let me tell you something about Mahomes that doesn't get said enough. He makes everyone around him better. Receivers who are average become good with Mahomes. Receivers who are good become great with Mahomes. It has been true every year of his career. But imagine the reverse equation. What does a truly elite receiver do for Mahomes? Think about it this way. When Mahomes has a number 1 receiver who demands true double coverage, who forces defensive coordinators to choose between covering him and leaving something else open, the entire offense breathes. Every other player on the field gets easier looks. Travis Kelce, who is back with Kansas City on another 1-year deal, would see the seams of the field open up in ways they haven't in years. The running game with Kenneth Walker in the backfield would benefit because a defense distracted by A.J. Brown cannot stack the box the way they'd want to. And what about the fourth quarter? What about the 2-minute drill? What about the situations where Mahomes needs to make a throw in traffic on a critical 3rd down with the season on the line? He needs a receiver who won't flinch, who will fight for the ball, who will take a hit and hold on anyway. A.J. Brown was literally born for that role. He is the physical embodiment of what you want in a clutch receiver. He's big enough to win in traffic. He's fast enough to separate on the outside. He has soft enough hands to catch a ball thrown into tight windows. He has the mental toughness proven over 6 NFL seasons to perform when everything is on the line. When you put A.J. Brown with Patrick Mahomes, you're not just adding a wide receiver, you're potentially building one of the greatest quarterback-receiver partnerships the league has ever seen. You're writing a chapter in NFL history before it even begins. And for A.J. Brown, who at 28 years old is looking at maybe 4 or 5 more peak seasons before his body starts to slow down, the idea of spending those seasons catching the most accurate, most creative, most impossible passes in football is intoxicating. This isn't just business, this is legacy. Chapter 8. The Ghosts of Super Bowl LIX. I need to bring you back to February. I need you to remember what happened in New Orleans. The Eagles beat the Kansas City Chiefs in Super Bowl LIX. And in that game, the difference wasn't just the score. The difference was weapons. The difference was offensive firepower. The Eagles had offensive tools that the Chiefs simply could not neutralize on the other side of the ball. Now, imagine that same matchup, but this time when you're putting together the depth chart, instead of A.J. Brown in an Eagles jersey, he's on the other side. He's with the Chiefs. He's the one creating mismatches. He's the one forcing defensive coordinators to panic. The Eagles' defense, which was so dominant in that Super Bowl, would now have to deal with the exact player they once relied on for their offense, the player who knows their system, who knows their tendencies, who spent years learning what works and what doesn't in Philadelphia's scheme. And on top of that, they'd have to deal with Travis Kelce, who is still one of the best tight ends in football regardless of